I'm Mike Fallon, Territory Manager in Ontario with Dorken Systems. We also have on the line Gary Schwab, who's based in Vancouver. So if you guys have any West Coast specific questions, Gary can kind of jump in at the end there and help you out. I've been with the company for 11 years now, and that is definitely an older picture of me. My beard is a little bit thicker now, but the hair on top of my head is definitely a little bit thinner. So I'll just never update that picture. For those of you guys who don't actually know Dorken, we manufacture all sorts of dimple sheet products and breathable membranes. So we have dimple sheets for foundations, a couple of dimple sheets for walls, and a whole line of different breathable membranes for both walls and roofs. So pretty much the entire building envelope from foundation to roof. And I want to talk to you guys a little bit today about the importance of air tightness in homes and other structures, and how we can achieve an airtight wall that will perform well and remain durable in colder climates with some of Dörken's products. And also talk about how we can build a wall with thin stone veneer that is well drained and ventilated with some of our Rainscreen products. So a little history on us. Dorken we're part of the Dorken group of companies. So we were founded in 1892 in a little town called Herdecke, Germany. This is a shot of us in 1925. So we're now 128 years old, still a family-owned company, which is real nice. We don't have to answer to shareholders every quarter. This is us now in Herdecke, so you can see how we've expanded. We take up pretty much half of this little town on the river. Herdecke is sort of close to Dortmund, if there's any soccer fans out there, and I think we're all watching Bundesliga now, as it's the only professional sports on TV right now, unless that's just me. And our head office is also based there as well. This is actually us in Canada. We're based in Beamsville, Ontario. This is where we manufacture the majority of our products for the North American market and South American market, actually. So you can see the gray part in the middle of the screen. Not sure if you guys can actually see my mouse, but this area here, the older gray part, was where we began manufacturing in 1995. In 2007, we put in this 50,000 square foot expansion, that whole white area. And we're currently just finishing up another expansion, which will bring us all the way out to the road in the top side of that picture. So we make all of our dimpled products here. We also make Schluter it's the orange Schluter product for the Schluter company. For underneath tiles, we make that for them here as well. So all of our dimpled stuff's made here. We still make our breathable membranes over in Germany and bring those over here, but we keep a huge stock of all of our membranes here. As you can see, about half of it's stored outside, and the other half is stored inside. There's 5 of us reps here in Canada. This is Gary here on the left, located downtown Vancouver. He looks after kind of Manitoba, everything west of that. Dave Demir is our National Director of Sales. He's based down by head office in Hamilton, Ontario. Mike Fallon, that's me, based in Toronto. And Patrick Lavoie, our Quebec rep, he's based in Montreal, looks after the Quebec region. And Jean-Michel is based in Quebec City and looks after kind of Eastern Quebec and Maritimes. I think I sort of break our products down into 3 categories. For foundations, we have both residential and commercial grade dimple sheets, drain boards, and some accessory products. For walls, we make breathable membranes and dimpled Rainscreens. This is what I'm really going to be focusing on today. And then for roofs, we have breathable underlayments for pitched roofs, and some of our dimpled products work well with flat roofs and garden roofs for drainage and water retention and things like that. I threw this up here. This is how most people kind of know us by in Canada, is the Delta MS. This is our regular dimple sheet for foundation walls. So this is the product we began manufacturing here in Canada. This is what most people know us by. It's installed on almost every new home in Canada, whether it's our product or someone else's. And we really changed the way people view their basements in Canada over the past 25 years, just into much more livable spaces, much drier spaces with that dimple sheet that wraps around foundations. But we've taken a lot of the expertise in the past 10 or 15 years or so from our parent company in Germany and brought that over here. In Europe, they're very well known for their breathable underlayments. They do mainly roofing over in Europe. That takes up a huge share of the market, and started bringing over some of those products to North America within the past 10 years. So today we're going to be focusing on the Delta high performance wall. So that's going to feature a couple of exterior wall membranes. So these are vapor permeable air and weather barriers, or kind of high-end house wraps. So we'll introduce Delta Vent S and Delta Vent SA. Then we'll talk about a dimpled Rainscreen family of products for thin stone veneer. So that's the product here you can see on the right, dimple sheets that create an airspace for behind things like thin stone or traditional stucco. And then finally, we'll introduce a newer product we have in Canada. It's a smart vapor retarder membrane called Delta NovaFlex. This would be a product that would be used on the inside of your homes to replace all of the poly. So get rid of the poly everywhere in the structure, basement walls, even above grade walls, cathedral ceilings. I'll introduce that one as well. So I wanted to start off with a quote from our good friend Joe Steebrook, who we work quite often with. This is from his article called The Perfect Wall. You can find this article on buildingscience.com. He says, today's walls need 4 principal control layers, especially if we don't build out of rocks. They're presented in order of importance: a rain control layer, an air control layer, a vapor control layer, and a thermal control layer. A point to this importance thing here: if you can't keep the rain out, don't waste your time on the air. If you can't keep the air out, don't waste your time on the vapor. So what he's saying here is, if you're not keeping the actual water out of your structure, there's no point doing anything else. Your structure is completely ruined. But interestingly here, his next control layer of importance is the air control layer. And this is because air carries with it a huge amount of moisture, so that can cause crazy damage in structures as well. And it also accounts for big time energy loss in structures. And then interestingly, again, at the bottom, I have Dr. John Straub. He's another building scientist located in Ontario. He flips the vapor and thermal layer in terms of importance. So he puts the vapor layer at the bottom, just saying that's less important even than the thermal control layer. So today we're really focusing on rain control, air control, and a bit on vapor control. And we'll leave the thermal control to the guys at, Rockwool, Owens Corning then. So somewhat related to that, we're going to start with the outside of the wall. What we typically see in residential construction is wood frame with a basic house wrap that acts as your water resistant barrier, or WRB. There are other options out there like insulating sheathing or zip wall or ICF, but today we're really going to be focusing on the popular wood sheathing with house wrap. So the purpose of this membrane, the water resistant barrier, is to keep out water, to manage moisture, and it can also be detailed as the air barrier. So this is an integral part of the house or the wall, as it performs several key functions. So it should be tough, durable, and be able to withstand both construction damage and also wind loads during and after construction. So with that said, finally, I want to introduce you guys to the Delta Vent family of products. Dorken manufactures these from scratch. They've been on the market for over 40 years. Started off in Europe as a roofing underlayment and is now approved as a roof and wall membrane. So WRB, house wrap, air barrier. Delta Vent, it's a 3-layer spun bonded polypropylene. It has extremely high water holdout and very high vapor permeability. So this is the amount of water vapor that's allowed to diffuse through the membrane. And you can sort of generalize and say the higher the permeability, the faster the drying. Go backwards here. It's been used extensively both in wall and roof construction throughout Europe originally, and now include hundreds or maybe even thousands of residential and commercial projects across North America for the past 10 or 15 years or so. One of my favorite projects we've done with it is being chosen as the underlayment for Parliament Hill's new copper roof. Designers here needed a membrane that would last the life of the copper, which is 50+ years. while remaining watertight and breathable. So we're proud to have Vent-S included on that one. So again, two options we have here: a nailed-on product called Vent-S and a self-adhered or peel and stick product called Vent-SA. So same product, a little bit different color. One's nailed on, one's peel and stick. So the Vent-S is our airtight, watertight, vapor permeable membrane. It's an extremely durable system that includes their seam tapes and flashings, and it would be more comparable to kind of an advanced version of your typical house wrap, but it's actually designed to last the life of the structure. So it's quite a bit thicker. It feels almost more like a fabric type material than a paper product. The really high tear resistance in the membrane means that it can withstand construction damage and wind loads, and even survive rough shipments from panelized assemblies that are prefabricated, off-site and then shipped to site. So can withstand the wind loads even of those shipments as well. So what this means is a more vapor open, less tears, and better water holdout for an overall faster drying wall versus your traditional house wrap. So it is installed very similarly to your traditional house wrap. You can see a mock-up here with both products installed on half of the wall, installed around windows very similarly as well. But the higher tear resistance in the Vent-S really plays a factor when we look at the staples or nail holes in the membrane. So both from wind and from pumping gusts from the interior of the structure can pull at the membrane at these fastener locations and cause little tears that can lead to water leakage and air leakage as well. So the strength and the durability of the Vent-S really ensures that it remains undamaged, even in the most extreme weather. There are a number of competitive products out there now. Just listed them here, just so you guys can see kind of what is most comparable to this, just because it's quite a big step up from something like Tyvek. So Siga has their MagVest or MyVest, I think they pronounce it. That's this blue membrane. Proclima has their Solitex Mento. Vapor Shield has a product called Wall Shield, more popular down in the US, and SRP has one here in Canada called Air Out Shield. So interestingly about these four products, they're all third-party manufactured. So all of these companies get their product made for them by someone overseas, some in Czech Republic, some in China. They make it to whatever color they want it, put their label on it, and call it their own. So the nice thing about the Vent-S, the Dorken products, is we actually make our membranes from scratch. So we get raw materials coming into our factory, and out the other end comes finished products. So we have that full control over that manufacturing process. And because of this, we can usually offer very competitive pricing as well. Now, if we want to eliminate all of the fasteners going into our air and weather barrier during installation, we can step up to a fully adhered or a peel and stick membrane. And this is where I want to introduce you guys to Delta Vent-SA. So this is the ultimate in air and water tightness. So fully adhered to the wall. What we did is we took the Vent-S membrane and applied a permeable adhesive to the entire back side of it. So you don't need to fire a bunch of nail holes through your weather barrier. Once the cladding is put up, you are getting nail holes through it, but the sticky part of the membrane will actually self-seal or form a gasket around those fasteners. It does pass the ASTM for nail sealability. It is a pretty basic test, but it just shows that it does form a gasket, and if you have any sitting water there, it won't be driven through at those nail holes. No special training is required to install the membrane. This is actually John Straub, the building scientist out of Waterloo, installing the product on his own house. So if he can do it, I'm sure the installers have no issues installing this stuff. Once they kind of get used to the peel and stick membrane, they actually like the install. It's pretty simple stuff. Doesn't require any special tools or anything like that. We recommend using a hand roller just to get out big kind of air pockets in behind. If you do get any air pockets or little cracks while you're installing it, just to rub those out flat. One of the nice features of the self-adhered membranes is that it bridges and seals all of the cracks between the sheathing boards. So whether it's OSB, plywood, or dense glass, you don't need any extra tape at those seams of those boards. It also sticks really well to block, concrete, steel, and really any other typical construction surface. Our popular roll size with the membrane is just under 5 feet, so 4 feet 11 inches by 115 feet. We do have 2 smaller detailing rolls. We specifically came out with these for some prefab companies out of the US, so they just needed smaller detailing rolls for when these panels actually show up to site to join some panels together. And then at some point this year, we're coming out with a 39 inch, so that'll give you a 3-foot roll with a 3-inch overlap. So a little bit more seams in the install, but a little bit easier to work with than the big 5-foot rolls. Both of these products can act as your water resistive barrier, but they can also be detailed as your air barrier. So this CAN ULC S74211, this is the Canadian Air Barrier Assembly Test. It's one of the newest tests we've passed with this product. It's not just a product test, it's actually a full assembly test. So that takes into account the vent SA, all of the tapes, flashings, it includes windows and doors. And then what gives it the nice Canadian twist is that they run the whole thing through a cold weather component. So they do the same as the ASTM test, but instead of just a regular weather cycle, they actually add a full cold weather cycle and do the same test. So it makes it Canadian by adding the cold weather in there. So there are a couple of ways to achieve an effective air barrier in residential construction. Your interior poly can be detailed as your air barrier. This requires over 45 connections in a typical single family home. And this is taken from RDH actually, who put this slide together. Alternatively, your exterior WRB can be detailed as your air barrier, which typically only requires around 22 connections on an average single family home. So less than half the amount of detailing work is required when it's done from the outside. And it's these connections where a huge majority of failures do occur in the air barriers. So the key point to take away here is really that it's much easier to detail your WRB as your air barrier than it is to detail your interior poly for an airtight assembly. And it's especially true with commercial assemblies. Often an exterior air barrier is the only viable approach. So a properly detailed air barrier can offer huge energy savings. It can actually account for upwards of 20% of energy loss in a home. And as code moves closer to net zero, air tightness is going to be key in builders reducing their air changes per hour and reducing their energy loads in their homes. So it not only helps with energy savings, but it also protects against moisture. Air carries with it a huge amount of moisture, a way bigger amount of moisture than compared to vapor diffusion, which would relate to Steebrook's vapor control layer that he mentioned as the least important. And that's why. It's because air carries with it so much moisture. And this moisture, if the airflow is uncontrolled, can cause big time moisture issues in the walls, which can lead to deterioration, rot, and even the big M word, mold. So as we like to say at Dorken, homes should dry, not breathe. So you should let the mechanical be the lungs of your home. These are the air barrier requirements from the Air Barrier Association of America. The Canadian version, NABA, makes similar recommendations. And you can see at the bottom here are the numbers for the impact that air barriers can have on energy consumption. So 16% of heating and cooling for office buildings, 24% for multi-unit residential buildings. And for a proper continuous air and water resistive barrier, we do offer a full set of accessories as well to go along with both VentS and VentSA. These include all of these tapes, prefabricated window corner inserts, sealants. I'll quickly go through each of these. Delta Multiband is our all-purpose seam tape, sort of a traditional sheathing tape on steroids. It would be more comparable to Sega's, I think it's Wiglove. They have a couple of other good tapes, multiband is most comparable to those kind of tapes. Really designed to last the life of the structure. It has a reinforcement grid built into it, and unlike the traditional sheathing tapes, it won't become brittle or delaminate over time. The adhesive actually gets stronger with the life of the structure, so it just gets stickier as time goes on. Similarly with our Delta flashing tape, another great tape. It's not acrylic, it's a butyl tape, designed for things like window openings, sills of windows, any transitions, or as a through-wall flashing. We make it in 6-inch, 9-inch, and 18-inch to act as the through-wall flashing there. Flexband is a really great tape we have. It's another butyl base, so it's bitumen rubber adhesive on a non-woven fabric, and it's actually stretchable tape, so it doesn't have a memory, so you can stretch it into any kind of awkward details or for things like pipe protrusions. You stretch it into that shape and it won't pull back into its original shape. So for things like a pipe protrusion, you can see at the bottom here, the 1, 2, 3, you just need a little piece going underneath the pipe, stretch it into shape, press it in, and then do the same thing with the top of the pipe with a stretchy piece and push it in, and your pipe is fully sealed for the life of the structure there. It's actually a great tape, works for all sorts of areas. It can also be used to seal the foundation wall to sheathing transition. That's another critical area for air and water leakage, and you can sort of find all sorts of uses for this. We have a lot of guys that use this below grade as well, around window cutouts and knife edges in commercial construction. So really a great tape for all sorts of purposes. Next is our Delta Fast Corners. These are prefabricated window corner inserts. We show them here being used in all 4 corners. Usually they're just used in the bottom 2 corners of the windows. Those are stapled in place before any sort of membrane is put on, and just held there until the membrane is folded over top, and then it's detailed up with our flashing tape with a strip along the sill and up the sides a couple of inches. And that's really a foolproof way of detailing up that pinhole detail in the corners of the windows. That's really where we get the most leaks in windows, is those 2 pinholes at the bottom. So this will take all of the guesswork out of it and give your installers a pretty simple way to do it. They sell for around $5 a piece, so not overly expensive, having 2 in every window just to ensure that air and water tightness. And then finally, our Delta Tillax. This is interchangeable with our Delta Fan, but right now we're sort of swapping everything over to our Delta Tillax sealant. That's a permanently elastic sealant, so it does move a little bit if there's any movement in the structure. It won't harden and then crack if there's any movement. And it can be used for all sorts of areas, so insides of windows, fully sealing those up, or joints of membranes, any detailing where you just can't use tape. This is a great sealant. So with the Delta Vent SA, the self-adhered membrane, there are a number of competitive products out there, and I just wanted to list them for you guys so you guys have an idea of what's comparable out in the market. You've probably seen some of these. I know in my market here in Ontario, I put these in order of most popular to least popular. So the ones we see everywhere are the Henry Blueskin VP160 and the Suprema. So it's this VP160 here and the Suprema Stick VP. 2 popular membranes because those are just 2 big companies out this way. Vapor Shield, 3M has one. 3M, they don't have a fully adhered membrane. It does have waves of acrylic adhesive on the backing, but it's not fully stuck on the wall, so it doesn't fit exactly into this category. Vapor Shield has one called Wrap Shield SA. You can see it doesn't stick. Bad product. It's the only one I'll say that's a bad product. I hope there's no one from Vapor Shield on the line here. SRP has a similar product, another orange membrane, peel and stick. And then a couple of other ones that are more getting pushed into the US right now. Ico, Grace, and Carlisle all have one. I haven't seen them yet in Canada. And then finally, Siga and Proclima both now have membranes. So there's a ton of products out there that are in this category. But interestingly, none of these companies make their own products. So all of them get them made for them overseas somewhere, most of them made in China. I know the VP160 is made in China. It's not a bad product, but made in China, in blue, put their label on it. They call it their own. Dorken actually manufactures the Vent SA from scratch. So again, raw materials into the membrane. We have the product coated with adhesive here in North America. So for that reason, we are actually very cost competitive with our membrane, just because we make it ourselves. So we have complete quality control over that manufacturing. We also, because we make our own membrane, we do publish a lot more testing than anyone else out there. We do more tests and we publish more tests. We've also done a whole number of third-party testing, things like UV resistance testing. We're the only ones to actually do the testing, even though a lot of companies out there make crazy claims about UV exposure. We're the only ones that have tested all the membranes out there and show how they compare with accelerated UV age testing. So it just shows how these products perform if left exposed to the sunlight. We've done adhesion testing and all sorts of stuff. This is all available online as well. If you guys need these comparison charts, we can make these available to you. And we're also the only ones that have this self-adhering strip on the front side of the roll. So what this is, at the top of every roll, there's a strip, and so you stick one roll to the wall, and then as you're sticking the next roll over top and shingling it downward, you peel off that strip on the top of the roll, and you have a nice strip of adhesive. So the next roll comes over top of it, and you get a nice adhesive to adhesive bond. So that really helps with air and water tightness. What most of the other companies out there selling these types of membranes will do is recommend some sort of mastic or primer or tape, not these long horizontal overlaps. The nice thing about the Ventasate, it has that built into it. So on areas where you don't have this self-adhering strip like end laps, we do recommend using our Delta multiband tape, just because none of these products stick too well to themselves. They're all essentially plastics in the end, so it's tough to stick anything to plastic. That's why we have this self-adhering strip built into it. One of the questions we get asked most about this product is, do you need a primer? So we are an old German conservative company, so we'll always say we recommend primer. It's not required with our product. It'll stick. The issue is if you have dust on your wall, it doesn't matter whose product you're sticking to it. It doesn't matter how sticky it is. You're sticking to the dust instead of sticking to the wall. So most of the time you'll find architects, if they are specifying a self-adhered membrane, they will specify a primer just for that reason. It's all about consolidating the surface of the wall. It's not about the adhesive properties of the membrane itself. It's if there's dust on the wall, you're sticking to the dust instead of sticking to the wall. So we do have two available. We have a water-based, more of a summer grade based primer, and Delta adhesive, which is a rubber-based, more of a winter grade based primer, good down to -12. This would be a good time for questions. If you guys do have any questions, though, I think I'm just going to keep talking, but if you do have any questions, please feel free to write them into the text box on the side there, hoping we can get to some of those at the end. Sort of switching a little bit now. We know that moisture in a wall cavity is unavoidable. It's true that all cavities get wet. The key to a durable wall is to balance wetting versus drying. And another quote here by Joe Steebrook: moisture problems occur when wetting exceeds drying. So it's okay that these walls do get wet. We just want them to be able to dry. So in the summertime, when the humidity in a wall cavity rises, with traditional vapor barriers on the inside of walls, moisture can become trapped in that assembly. Because your vapor drive is inward, this moisture condenses on a cool, impermeable surface, like you can see here on the poly. So this is where I'd like to introduce you guys to Delta NovaFlex. So NovaFlex, it's a smart vapor retarder. It's smart in that it senses higher humidity levels and changes its molecular structure to become vapor open. So this allows moisture to dry to the interior in the summertime when is required. And in the wintertime, when humidity levels are low and the vapor drive reverses to outward, NovaFlex remains vapor closed. So it stops that interior moisture from entering the wall cavity unnecessarily. The smart vapor retarder is perfect for both above grade walls and basement walls. And in Europe, actually, we see it used quite often in vaulted or cathedral ceilings. So where that inside the attic space is treated the same as any other living space, and your insulation's up in the wall cavity instead of flat in your attic. Installing a smart membrane on the inside of basement walls, it allows any moisture from the initial construction of the foundation to dry to the interior, stopping moisture from getting trapped behind the poly. It's also key in letting moisture from the vapor drive, which happens inward, mostly at the top of the foundation wall, to dry to the interior. So Doug Terry, who's a builder in Ontario, and our friends from Performance House in Edmonton, who actually shared these pictures with us, they've been pushing smart vapor retarders for basement walls for a number of years now. They spent quite a bit of time trying to identify the moisture issues still happening behind the poly in their basements, and they came to the realization that the vapor barrier is actually in the wrong place for half of the year. So installing a smart membrane in place of the poly can fix this issue. And even at an added cost, builders can sell this as a package to their prospective buyers as sort of a drywall ready or move-in ready basement. Sell it to them as once they move in, they can go ahead, feel free to drywall up because you're not going to have any moisture trapped behind that poly. I actually bumped into Ian here hiking on a trail in Dundas, Ontario on Sunday, and we had a nice socially distant chat on smart membranes while both of our wives stood around waiting with our babies strapped to the front of them, looking fairly bored. But him and his group at Hummingbird Hill Homes were nice enough to share this quote with us for this presentation. He says, "Smart vapor retarders give us the peace of mind knowing that our wall will perform as intended for the next 50 years and beyond. With vapor drive happening in both directions in our climate, we need to be sure our wall assembly can dry to the interior if needed, as opposed to the moisture trapping approach commonly employed. This is settled science, but for some reason isn't common practice." So these guys are big believers in smart vapor retardant membranes as well, both for basement walls and above grade walls. So those are kind of the three membranes that make up the high performance wall that aren't cladding specific. So the Ventas nailed on product, Ventas A peel and stick, and NovaFlex as the interior smart vapor retarder in place of something like poly. We do make another family of products that are cladding specific. So Delta Facade S, you can see on the right here, Facade S and Facade SA. These are specifically designed for open joint claddings. So I'm going to very quickly touch on these because this is a CSI webinar and not an open joint cladding webinar. Just to show you guys a little bit of our expertise in this. If you are designing any walls with open joints, so that's if it's wood strips like this or architectural panels like you can see here on the right that have open joints, so open joint rear ventilated rain screen assembly they call it. If your sunlight will be penetrating through these seams, that's what we specifically designed Facade S for. It's a matte black, completely UV resistant, water resistant barrier. So it's still vapor permeable, 328 perms. It's a polyester membrane, but it has a fully UV resistant acrylic coating on the outside of it, so meant to be left exposed for the life of the structure. Won't deteriorate, won't fade or anything like that. We do make tapes and flashings out of the same membrane, so you can kind of get that solid black look in behind your cladding without anything else showing. This is more of a commercial assembly, very typical of a commercial assembly with open joints. So in this one you have Delta Vent SA, just any primary air water resistive barrier. If you do have all exterior insulation here, you can actually get away with a vapor barrier. But either way, you have a primary air water barrier there. Exterior insulation, something like rock wool or Owens Corning, mineral wool is always best to have a vapor permeable insulation. And then in this case, Delta Facade S on the outside of the insulation to act as your secondary weather barrier and UV barrier. So that'll give you a secondary drainage plane, protect that insulation from any wind-driven rain or wind washing, and also give you that black look in behind your cladding. I just threw up a couple of examples. This is a Prodema product, so it's a wood-looking material with open joints in it. It's just a custom home out of near Toronto. I threw in a Cactus Club project since this is a West Coast company, I think, Cactus Club. So they started out west. This is from a project in Toronto. That's all Oco skin cladding, so it's these concrete cladding panels that have open joints in between them. So you can see they have black girts to install them into, and then behind that Delta Facade S to give you that black look. And then our favorite picture, I have to have it in every presentation, our big competitors' new office and plant out in Drummondville, Quebec, all wrapped up in Delta Facade S and Okoscape. So I have to have that one in every presentation. And then we also make the same product in a fully self-adhered version. So if you're looking for that peel and stick membrane and at the same time UV resistance, we make the Facade S in that version as well. So fully peel and stick UV resistant. Now I want to talk to you guys a little bit about Rainscreens for thin stone veneer or traditional stucco. So when I say thin stone veneer, I'm talking about any stone product that's usually adhered to the wall instead of being stacked with an air gap. And when I say traditional stucco, I'm referring to stucco that's not part of an EIFS system. So no built-in insulation and drainage. Excuse me. We don't see traditional stucco as much up here in Canada as we do in the US. They still do a ton of traditional stucco, but thin stone veneer acts very much like this traditional stucco in its water absorption properties. So they should be treated somewhat similarly. So these pictures were taken from projects that didn't incorporate any Rainscreen design or any air gap in behind the thin stone veneer. So why should we be concerned about moisture? Well, things can get ugly. What's primarily happening here is water is getting behind the stone and soaking the sheathing. The issue is the sheathing is not allowed to dry since there's no airspace for drainage or ventilation. So water gets in behind, gets stuck, and rots out that wood. Stone veneer and stucco, they're known as absorptive claddings. So that means they suck up moisture like a sponge when it rains. This moisture can then be driven through the cladding by the sun, and that's known as solar-driven moisture. What happens is this moisture makes its way through, hits a cool surface, condenses in the wall cavity, and starts causing issues if it can't escape. So how do we dry this? Well, there's 4 drying mechanisms in a wall: surface evaporation, diffusion and convection, and the 2 we're going to aid with today are drainage and air exchange or ventilation. So drainage is liquid water hitting a surface and draining downwards, and air exchange or ventilation, which is the circulating movement of air carrying away moisture with it. So there are a number of meshy type Rainscreen products out there that do a decent job of creating that required airspace in behind the adhered stone. They're more kind of entangled mesh type products. To my knowledge, they're all made outside of Canada, mostly in the US and imported up here. We do make ours locally here in Canada. But with all of these mesh type products, you get that solar driven moisture that's pushed through the stone by the sun, kind of hanging out in that wall cavity, remaining in contact with the WRB and sheathing. So there's no immediate shedding of water there. So we can solve that issue of solar driven moisture with an impermeable but ventilated at the top and bottom Rainscreen, which will act as a capillary break. So this is where I want to introduce you guys to Delta Dry. It's a great, simple product that helps optimize the drainage and ventilation drying mechanisms that I mentioned earlier. So any solar-driven moisture pushed through the stone will come into contact with the Delta Dry and drain downwards. So a key here is leaving a gap at the top and bottom of the Delta Dry itself for ventilation, so it can draw air in through the bottom, out through the top, and take away all of that moisture with it. So it stops all moisture from getting through and adds ventilation. We do make the product in 3 versions, and they're sort of listed in order that we started manufacturing them. So we first started with Delta Dry. This is just the 11mm dimpled membrane only, nothing adhered to it. Nowadays, it primarily gets used with thin stone whose manufacturers say the stone has to be adhered to something like cement board. So that assembly will look like sheathing, WRB, then Delta Dry, then cement board, then stone. And they use a special type of mortar to adhere that stone to the cement board, just because they don't want to use any sort of metal lath or fiberglass lath. They say their product sticks best to cement board with a special adhesive. So Delta Dry is perfect for that type of application. That'll give you that nice drainage and ventilation in behind that cement board. Delta Dry Stucco and Stone was the next version of the product we came out with. That's the 11mm dimpled membrane, and it has an adhered filter fabric on it. So what this filter fabric does is it stops that scratch coat from going in and clogging up those dimples. So with this type of product, you still need to install a metal lath on the outside of it, and then install your thin stone there. And then finally we said, well, what if we just adhered the lath to the product itself, got rid of a full step, and that's when we came out with the Delta Dry lath. So this product, this is our newest version. It's an amazing product. It has a fiberglass lath already attached to the product itself. It's an alkali resistant, so it won't rust out like galvanized lath. It's super lightweight, so it makes the whole roll light, easy to use. It's also easy to cut. It doesn't shred the installer's hands on site like a metal lath will. The one-step install eliminates the need to go around the entire structure again with a metal lath and a Rainscreen. So it's kind of a one-step install. The guys at CSI actually did a really nice side-by-side comparison for us. They had one house with Rainscreen plus lath and then thin stone, and the exact same house next to it, they did Delta Dry and lath, just a one-step install. And they found there's huge labor savings with the one-step install. Just guys don't need to go around again and nail up another lath. So even though the product might cost a little bit more upfront, you do get that huge labor savings. So again, yeah, 3-in-1 product, eliminates metal lath, went through all of this. But yeah, if you have any questions on that product, the guys at CSI are really excited about it. They've moved a whole bunch of material for us already. Reach out to them with any questions if you want a sample or anything like that, brochure. They're very well versed with this product. Bug screen, this is the one accessory we have for the product. This is to be installed at the top and bottom of the membrane. What this does is make sure, obviously, no bugs go in behind there, clogging up the system. But what it also does is make sure that the installer leaves that gap at the top and bottom, because that's critical. Since we are putting up an impermeable membrane on the wall, we need that ventilation to occur in behind there. So it's key that they leave it open at the top and bottom. These are details we have for installing Delta Dry with exterior continuous insulation. And we have some different recommendations based on the type of insulation you're using. So if you're using XPS or EPS, we recommend putting the Delta Dry up first, then putting the insulation, then the thin stone. So you'll still need a wire lath on the outside of that insulation. This should give you that ventilation in behind the insulation and really help dry out the sheathing. That's what we're mainly trying to dry out here, is the sheathing. Any moisture that gets in that sheathing, we want it to be able to escape and ventilate out. Option 2, we're showing XPS and EPS on the wall first, and then Delta Dry and lath, and then thin stone on the outside of that. This is not the best option to do. It'll give you drainage and ventilation for your stone or your stucco, but it won't give you that ventilation for your actual sheathing itself. So that XPS insulation sort of right up against the sheathing and trapping any moisture in that assembly. And then best practice is on the right here. This is an installation with mineral wool insulation. So, you know, rock wool or Owens Corning both have mineral wool now. This is the best way to go. So your assembly will look like cavity insulation, then sheathing, water resistive barrier, then stone or mineral wool insulation, then Delta Dry installed on the outside of the insulation. That's fastened through with fasteners all the way through the insulation into the stud, and then thin stone or stucco on the outside of the Delta Dry. So that's kind of a best practice approach there. We have some good details showing this as well. We also have some good installation instructions, obviously a technical data sheet, and we have a great installation video for this, the Delta Dry and lath, on our website. It's on our YouTube channel as well. If you guys want, we can share these with you guys afterwards. I think CSI has them all on their website, or they'll have them up there fairly soon. They can share these with you guys. Yeah, we have install videos for the Delta Dry, also for the Vent SA and the Facade S as well. Nice little animated installation videos, only a couple minutes long, and kind of show you the best practice approach. Yeah, we have all of our details on Autodesk Revit now, so anyone doing BIM out there. We do have some Passive House certified consultants on staff with us, so if you guys are doing any Passive House builds, have any questions, reach out to us. We have Passive House certified guys that can help answer your questions. Vent SA is actually a certified Passive House component now. So great product if you're doing any homes, super airtight homes that are Passive House. Delta Academy is our online portal where we have, I think, 6 or 7 now accredited AIA presentations. These are fully narrated CEUs that you can go on and do yourself. We give you the certificate afterwards and give you that full 1-hour learning credit. These are usually our in-person presentations, but we've now fully recorded them, put them online. Now that so many people are working from home, great option while you guys are working from home.